My name is Ejaaz. Today I'm going to be presenting on Web3 agents. The markets are down. China's coming for our AI. It's important to focus on whether any of this makes sense or is it just completely all over. For any of you who can't appreciate this meme that is up on the screen right now, it's semiconductor fund managers after seeing 4 memes about DeepSeek on X. I find that pretty funny anyway. But a brief introduction. My name is Ejaaz. I've basically spent around 8 years building products within crypto at Coinbase and Consensus. At Coinbase, I was a technical PM. They basically hired me to do a bunch of non-exchange stuff. So anything around staking, wrap tokens, and anything that was considered degen for them back then. Oh, hey, what's up? So I see a bunch of Coinbase folk here actually, which can attest to me losing money on the company account when I was trying out some of these new lending protocols, but it was super fun at the time. And I also spent some time at Consensus doing a bunch of token engineering and worked on a bunch of the ETH2 staking stuff as well. But I quit all of that last year to start a liquid fund, which is primarily focused on the crypto AI sector, which I was deeply pretty much fascinated by. And sometimes I appear on Bankless to talk about some of this crypto AI stuff, but really I'm just like a nerd at heart. So the goals of this talk is basically to give you an overall view of what this thing is, what it can be, and why I think it's one of the most important things for founders across all subsectors of crypto to focus on. And I must emphasize, this isn't a tutorial. This is kind of like a warm-up act before like the smarter people come on. But yeah, hopefully this is helpful to a bunch of you at least. So to kick it off, like, why are we even bothering with all of this? What is this thing? The obvious take for me, for my opinion, is the overlap of crypto, or crypto and AI rather, two separate technologies, are a perfect marriage for each other. And I kind of think about this in 2 buckets. Bucket number 1 is, I'm calling it the resource stack. Actually, one of the first conversations I had with Katie here at Archetype was when this kind of sector was like popping off, and we were talking about like, okay, what are some of the deep-in networks that we could launch? Compute networks, data aggregation, data labelers and stuff. Kind of like the unsexy, boring stuff, which was actually super important. And then the other side that we look at, or that I call the second bucket, is the agent stack, which I kind of think about as an abstraction layer, which means, okay, we have all this amazing blockchain stack or software that we've built up. And then we have like all these applications that we're trying to build, but connecting the two has been almost impossibly hard, right? The onboarding challenge within crypto is no secret to anyone. So I find agents being like the medium to connect these two things to be pretty promising, at least from that side of things. But there's also a ton of non-obvious things to focus on, which is, how do we even interact with these things? What are these things even going to do for us? And of course, the big question, are they actually all autonomous, or are they all just ChatGPT wrappers and we should just, pack it in? I think before we get into this, it's important to like seed everyone with like a vision, right? Because if you don't have any kind of vision around this sector, you're going to end up spiraling in different kinds of ways. My personal vision of this is I think agents are going to be the number 1 users of blockchain. What do I mean by that? I think they're going to be the number 1 creators of tokens, the number 1 transactors of tokens. They're going to be the number 1 deployers of smart contracts. Basically, the biggest actors of blockchains, in my opinion, will end up becoming agents. And my simple thesis around this is we've spent like the better part of a decade building out an alternative financial system built in open source code and tooling. And then we, as humans who sleep 8 hours a day and have different kinds of moods and stuff, are operating this very complex infrastructure. What about if we had a really hyper-intelligent human being that was birthed in code? Wouldn't that be, and that could operate 24/7? Wouldn't that be potentially a better suitor? Now, a lot of critics would respond to that and say, well, they're just not smart enough. And I agree with most of you. But I'm saying, what can it potentially be if these agents actually do become as smart as us and can eventually outperform us? And we've seen that with a lot of the DeepSeek stuff that Danny mentioned earlier. So if we assume that this vision is going to be something potentially true, right? Maybe it has a 50% hit rate, 30% hit rate. It is important for us to consider how these things that we've built are from a first principle standard of things. Now, I can see a few people kind of like perking up, their eyes are widening, like, could we be building a new L1 here? Maybe okay, maybe the 200th EVM L2, maybe. And my answer is, I have no idea. Maybe that is the answer. But my point is, we need to kind of dial it back and figure out whether this design makes the most sense for our new, future overlords. And I do think that the low-hanging fruit can sit in some obvious use cases. For example, taking out a loan, a collateral-backed loan on DeFi isn't the most exciting thing, right? And it's also not the most intuitive thing right now if you want to execute it as a human. But maybe if you were to type in just common speak to an agent in a ChatGPT-like interface like you can on apps like Griffin right now, maybe it would be super cool. Or Wayfinder is another example. Another example might just be, being able to execute a transaction for wallet balances that are across many different types of chains. Like maybe it'll just make that a hell of a lot easier, right? But of course, there's a lot of FUD that comes with all of these kinds of suggestions. They're just bots. They're just ChatGPT wrappers, right? A few things that I want to say on this is, I think any 0 to 1 technology never starts off with the perfect solution. It's always going to look a little bit hacky. It's always going to be like, kind of like trialed attempts. We're never going to be sure like whether it's going to, actually work out. But what I would urge people to do is focus on different kinds of metrics. Don't look at like the obvious thing, which is, can the agent trade better than a human? Look at the agent's reasoning capabilities. Look at its contextual memory structure. Like, is it becoming more human is the question I always ask myself when I'm looking at these agents and tracking it. If the answer is no over a set period of time, then I'm like, okay, cool, maybe this isn't going to be something. But if you look at a lot of the open source development in crypto AI right now, particularly on certain agent teams, you'll see that development kind of like get better over time. The next thing is autonomy. Now, I know this is a really hot topic because everyone is like, your agent needs to be fully autonomous or it's just fake. It's fake and you guys are lying to everyone. I agree. Any team that's saying their agent is fully autonomous and it's not actually fully autonomous, yeah, you call it out, right? That's improper marketing. But if the team is working towards kind of like full autonomy, and it kind of reminds me of like, we're not fully decentralized yet, but we're working towards it. It's kind of like the same thing. You've got to like handhold these agents to start off with. You're not going to give a toddler car keys and say, off you go. You've got to kind of like structure that progress out. And I think that that's like pretty important to focus on. But okay, enough talking. What's actually out there? What can actually be used? What are some of these agents doing? I present to you the groundbreaking innovation of Twitter agent KOLs. Now, I know what you're thinking. It probably can't get better than this, right? The pinnacle of AI agents have to be Twitter KOLs, and actually they can get better. I think what most people don't realize is some of these Twitter KOL agents have grown to hundreds of thousands of followers. I think AIXBT today is at like 440,000 followers, and it's kind of crazy to see because I think a bunch of us in this room, at least that I know, watched it grow from like 5,000 followers literally 2.5 months ago. So pretty insane levels of traction. But I think people aren't focused on the fact that these agents could be Trojan horses or will be Trojan horses for products and services. And I think, did I include? Oh yeah. AIXBT announced their official AIXBT terminal, I think about 3 days ago, which basically acts as a crypto Bloomberg terminal. And it has a tiered structure. You can get access via staking its tokens, spending it. I actually chatted with the team today and they have a bunch of cool stuff that they're launching, which I really want to talk about, but I can't. But just keep an eye on like teams like this to just kind of see what might be inspired from this entire like meta. And I kind of put a tweet out about this a while ago, and I'm thinking, okay, well, let's say every agent or good agent becomes a secret Trojan horse for products or services. How will that be surfaced to everyone, to you and I? I think maybe in the short term, it'll be some kind of like an app store. I'm seeing teams like this, like AI16Z, they have like a kind of app store interface on their website. Griffin is building the same. I know I keep mentioning these names. These are literally just the names that come to me. I don't have any like kind of like investment in that sense. But I'm just seeing like teams build around this. But I think eventually we're going to move away from the agent app store and build something that's known as like a agentic web, but I just sound like a crazy person saying that. So I'm just going to say agent app store for now, and we'll see what it actually ends up becoming. Another sector which is really hot at the moment is probably the obvious like low-hanging fruit that I mentioned earlier, which is DeFi or AI-fi, whatever you want to call it, which is basically combining an agent with its own wallet and giving it ownership and control over it. So it can do a bunch of things. Now, there's a few components to look out for within this sector. Number one is agent execution platforms. So things like Wayfinder, Griffin, again, Hive. Is the Hive dude here? Maybe not. Maybe not. Basically, what these are is it's kind of like a ChatGPT-like interface, and you can interact and talk to it in a normal way and say, hey, can you do A, B, and C for me? And it'll understand what you're asking for in retrospect and do a ton of things. So the most simplest form is, hey, can you swap X token for Y token? And X token is on chain A and Y token is on chain B. And it'll abstract away everything for you and do it in the back end, which is super cool. But we kind of want to think deeper than that, right? So Wayfinder had this really cool product demo, I think about a month ago, or maybe 3 weeks ago, where they were like, hey, now you can ask this agent to deploy contracts for you as well. You can launch a token and then offer like a staking contract and stuff. So I just think these things are going to get increasingly more complex. Like me, who is kind of technical, but doesn't spend all his time coding, can now just do a bunch of things that I couldn't do before, which I thought was super cool. And then the third, maybe unsexy thing is risk optimization, right? Which is like, I don't want to keep looking at an LP position that I've taken in Uniswap if I'm like supplying a certain token to a pool, but maybe something else can just monitor it for me and sort all of that out. The next sector that I'm seeing get quite a bit of traction is gaming. Now, there's a forbidden term that we haven't mentioned since 2021 for good reasons, which is the metaverse. And I think that potentially, and I'm not going to like say this for sure, but I'm seeing a lot of mediums being created that would allow these agents to kind of interact with humans in different ways beyond just like social media sites. So, okay, what does this kind of look like? I think in games specifically, you'll see NPCs or non-playable characters be super smart now. And they'll change your storyline as you kind of interact with these different types of agents. The reason why this makes sense is because gamers typically have, and I used to be a gamer, so I'll say this, typically have the profile of being kind of fantasical when it comes to these things. So if you put like a imaginary personality or an autonomous personality, they'll kind of interact with it and see what happens. There's a ton of cool things actually happening with some of the Roblox open worlds as well. Another cool thing is adaptable environments, right? So if you combine AI with a bunch of auto-generated environments, it'll like react and reflect to how your storyline is happening within a game. But I like the third point the most, which is like it's probably going to create some kind of a new social layer. Now, this is like pretty far up the kind of like moonshot curve right now. I don't think it's quite materialized, but think of like what Meta wants to kind of create around like a metaversal kind of ecosystem. I think we'll start to see more of these things happen once these agents actually get smarter. If you think about like the NFT phase and why that failed, you could argue that it's because NFTs typically weren't as dynamic as you'd want them to be, whereas now you have a medium where it would be. This third bucket is I'm basically saying, I think these agents can do a lot of Web3 stuff, but also a lot of Web2 stuff. And I'm curious to see how these two things combine. One crypto app which launched recently combines agents that have like Shopify integrations with agents that can also do Web3 stuff. I don't know where that's going to end up, but I know for a fact that attaching a token to most things, as is crypto's #1 use case, is really good at aggregating capital and attention and making people do certain things. This is Jesse from Coinbase ordering pizza. And then the fourth one, which is probably the most popularized bucket, is agent platform. So this is the infrastructure play for all of these different agents. And a few things about these. The best way to think about this is, well, the analogy I use is it's the new L1, or it's an agent L1. And people hate that because they're like, we don't need to create another blockchain. And I agree. I just use it because it's an easy analogy. What I'm referring to is the supporting platform and tooling for these agents. And I think they're going to be chain agnostic, they're going to be framework agnostic, and they're going to be embedded across any kind of wallet or chain that you interact with. If you think about it, like agents should be chain agnostic. They shouldn't care about which chain they're on. They should just care about what the best path of execution is for whatever goal they're trying to fulfill. They'll be embedded everywhere, and there'll be new tooling. New tooling in the sense of, okay, can I trust what this agent's doing? I need some kind of verification. Can I trust that this agent is operating autonomously? Okay, I need a trusted execution environment. Things like that. Okay, and to wind this all up, where are we all going? Like, what are these agents going to eventually do? I have a hypothesis, Travis Kling token, right? The father of financial nihilism within crypto, where his theory is basically, we're all going to end up in a society of hyper gambling. And, what better way to gamble your sorrows away than with an autonomous financial, and I'm kidding, obviously, but I think that there are different kind of buckets that we can focus on. And I don't think we're too far away in terms of stage one, which is, I think open source AI agents, that as a sector, is gaining its most traction within crypto specifically, right? And that's where like most of the open source AI agent development is currently happening. And the archetype of a typical crypto individual, as we all know, is half like, research genius, on-chain, innovator, and then half like pain-seeking gambler. And I think we'll see agents that are more kind of financially operated or like designed to kind of like make the most money for their token holders or for a particular use case, whatever that might be. Stage 2, I think, will be what I'm calling unsexy agents. So I kind of see this as like contractor agents, which do a lot of back-end stuff. So this could be data aggregation, data labeling, compute networks, making things like routing certain inferences to certain models or whatever that might be. Just doing a lot of back-end work so that your front-end agent can seem like a genius, essentially. I kind of describe it as like a gig economy happening in the back end. And then the third stage, which I'm really excited to see, is kind of like the rise of these new consumer social apps. And I guess the way I'm thinking about this is right now, agents are proliferating mainly on X. And it's really cool that you can interact with them. I think the Clanker guys are here. So like on Farcaster, you can like @Clanker and it would launch a token for you. And I remember seeing that, an agent interacting with another agent. I'm like, wow, I wonder if this could happen on like, one of the more popular sites as well. And it's cool to see some of these things surfacing. I've had some conversations with the guys at X, and it's very early, but they're definitely exploring what these kind of interactions might look like. And I'm curious to see like what happens when these agents start talking to each other, and maybe you can like access certain Web2 products and Web3 products. But I'll leave it at that. I think we're done. Yes. Okay. Cool.